Gordon lines up Chandler, goes behind the back, fades back, high archer, good! Oh, that's filthy. That's just filthy. 25 for G-Time.
This is Gordon Hayward. We are ready to tip it off. Are you? Let's do this.
Well, look at G-Time's work. It's been fabulous, and there's encouraging signs to it, plus the development of Rudy Gobert. But first, an NBA 5 with interesting comments from a head coach. Durant is back, and Dirk is awesome. It's all coming up on this edition of Tip Off. Pow. Hope you're doing well. Lots of daily DeVars this time of year, as I often talk about with you. Jazz are running a program this year that that I've known about. The guys actually really take it very seriously and think it's very important to them, of ticket giveaways. That's really kind of cool. Each of them have their own section. They, at the beginning of the year, commit to buying a certain amount of tickets that then either through the team or through themselves, depending on their involvement, right? So maybe they have a charity, they have some things that they're really important to, they want to make sure are taken care of. Through their involvement, then they donate tickets. 15,000 game tickets to community this season are donated by Trey, Alec, Derek, Gordon, Ennis. Pretty neat. Each player's purchased their block of tickets for the home games, and then they do it. The other one, by the way, additional, it kind of just they drop this in there quietly. I hope they don't mind me telling the story, but also tickets are purchased by players part of the Jazz community ticket programs. And then in the release, by the way, it said also additional tickets donations courtesy of the Jazz president and Jazz general manager Dennis Lindsey. Okay, the Lindseys actually do a tremendous amount. And Dennis's wife is a former teacher, and Dennis's family, as I think we know, his mom passed away in a car accident coming back from a game at Baylor, and his dad just passed just recently. And they kind of were foster parents. They used to have Dennis grew up in a house that had a ton of kids as they helped out so many people. The Lindseys do a tremendous amount for teachers. Because Dennis's wife used to be a teacher, and they do it very behind the scenes, and they'll probably be mad at me for mentioning this. So that probably, if I don't work for us next year, it's because probably no, I'm just kidding. Hopefully. But I just, they deserve some accolades as well in this program. I mean, we definitely highlight our 5 players who do it, and I think that's really, really important. And other players are involved as well. But I'd let you guys know that it tells you a little bit about Dennis, who's obviously at a large level of control of what's going on with our future and our franchise, and the ability to acquire talent and do all those kind of things. So I don't know. I hope they don't mind, but I wanted people to know that they do this amount of work too. All right, we got a really good show today. I got to get the kids here at some point. So a little limit on time. So let's get right to it. But really interesting stuff today in the NBA 5, and then some fabulous stuff on Gobert's kind of growth inside of the season, as well as a little piece or two on Gordon Hayward, and then some interesting comments yesterday from Brian Shaw.
This is Ian Clark, and you are Locked On Jazz.
Thank you, my man, Ian. What a good dude. All right, let's do the NBA 5. Kevin Durant is back. Oklahoma City falls last night. They don't look quite right yet, obviously, but he's back. Bad loss for them, though. Anytime Oklahoma City, Phoenix, Sacramento, Denver, or I think, is that 4? Yeah, all play each other. Those are huge games, because those are the games. There's only one playoff spot available. There's 7 playoff teams. They're all set in the Western Conference. How they're going to intermix and what's going to happen when they do, it's going to be crazy. But there is only, so that's a big one. And New Orleans, frankly, was pretty desperate for a win. They're underperforming again to what their talent level probably is. Tariq Evans dropped 30 last night in that game, but Anthony Davis is just incredible. The nightly box score line, and we saw it in person when he put 40 on the Jazz. Last night, though, there always seems to be something if you watch him, and I watched a little last night. Last night was 6 steals. Like, really? 6 steals? So last night, Anthony Davis, he was really good. They were plus 23 when he was on the floor last night. 25 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 steals, 4 blocks. I don't really follow PER that much. That's Hollinger's. He's putting together the greatest PER season in the history of the game. As a numbers guy, I have always been a huge proponent that you foul up 3. Watching Chicago execute it terribly, watching how many teams I've seen recently execute it terribly, there's no doubt in my mind that you foul up 3 on paper. But a game's not played on paper, and I got to tell you what, watching teams' complete inability to do it, and the fact that I've never seen a team practice it, tells me maybe you don't foul up 3. Kirk Heinrich last night fouls Monte Ellis up 3, and instead of having him take a buzzer beater, Monte Ellis goes to the line, knocks down all 3 free throws. Rose actually hits a banked-in buzzer beater in the first overtime, and Dallas wins it in the second overtime last night. 132-129. 38 for Monte Ellis. Dirk Nowitzki last night was so impressive. He hurt his back. He was grabbing at his back continually throughout the game. But every time that Chicago missed in the first, or really mostly in the first overtime I saw this, Dallas would get a rebound. Their guys are tired. They've played 40 minutes. They've played 35 minutes. And they'd want to walk it up the floor, and he wouldn't let them. Here's a 36-year-old dude who has got a bad back, who would probably be the first one who'd like to walk up the floor, urging his teammates to get up the floor quickly because he knows what you can't do in the half court against Chicago. It just, to me, was the essence of a veteran, of greatness, of a champion, that just a little thing there. But every time everybody, come on, he's the guy doing it. It's one thing if your head coach is doing it off to the side, but it's another thing when one of the guys on the floor is doing it. And that's, when you wonder, like, well, what's the difference between a veteran team and a young team? That's it right there. I mean, that's a great example. That's a championship level kind of attention to detail stuff going on. It's pretty awesome. Weird ending in Brooklyn, New York. It was almost as though Derek Fisher was calling timeout. It's hard to believe Carmelo didn't hear him. Carmelo jacks a 3 right in front of him while he's trying to call a timeout. Fisher also was on the other half of the floor trying to call it. By the way, your boy Kyle Korver, our boy Kyle, a guy we love, sporting a 76.8 true shooting percentage. 76.8. I think 52.7 is the league average. 76.8. Of all the mistakes the Jazz have made in the last few years, whether you can debate them or not, that one's not debatable. We blew that one. Should have never let him go. How the game was evolving, the importance of the 3. I mean, there's others. We can look back in various drafts and say, oh, we could have done this or that or these or those. But that one, tell me we should have re-signed Kyle Korver? You bet. Oops. Can look at Wesley Matthews. We should have matched. There's some debate on that. There's some reasons why. Sorry, got a headphone issue going on. There we go. There's some reasons why or why not that's the case. But on the Kyle Korver, indisputable. Interesting story out of Dallas as Dallas heads to Milwaukee that Donnie Nelson wanted Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Mark Cuban wouldn't let him draft him because they didn't want to use their draft pick that high. So they traded down to go get Shane Larkin, who they then ended up not doing anything with because they wanted to keep their money for free agency and they wanted to stick to their plan. I kind of admire them for sticking to their plan. But it's interesting that because if they drafted Giannis, then they didn't have enough free agent money to make their play. 2 years ago, which turned out to be very little, and then this year turned out to be Chandler Parsons and Tyson Chandler a year later. So they may not have been able to do that if they had drafted Giannis. So it's an interesting, but it's also a good insight to how one move is never isolated in that fashion. Here's some interesting comments from Stan Van Gundy last night about Detroit. We're really messed up right now. I mean, really messed up as a team. Lots of dilemmas, lots of guys feeling pressure, whatever, but we're really not right mentally. That's what we talked about. They've got to change before anything else does. There's too many nights, in fact, almost every night, where the other team plays harder with more energy than we do. You don't deserve to win like that. You don't. We don't have enough talent to overcome lack of effort. And again, I don't think it's laziness. This is what I think was interesting. I don't think it's laziness. I think there's too much stuff up here in their heads, and I don't know how to get it out. They're going to have to take care of themselves and just come back and play. It's also why we fight back when we're down, because what happens when you're down 18 or 20, you're not worried about losing. So you just play. You just play. A guy makes one more shot. What's the difference? You just play, and all of a sudden things go well. We've got to get to that mentality over a 48-minute game. I think there's a lot to what resonates with what's going on with Utah. With that, we've been down by 15 or more than any other team other than Philadelphia in the NBA, and each time we come firing back. We have to fight. Why we fight back when we're down? Because what happens when you're down 18 or 20, you're not worried about losing. So you just play. You just play. A guy makes one more shot. What's the difference? You just play, and all of a sudden things go well. We've got to get to that mentality over 48 minutes. Very interesting comment there from Stan Van Gundy.
Hi, this is Trevor Booker. I want to hear from you. Call 801-200-3738 and ask me a question. That is 801-200-3738 to ask me a question.
Well, that's our listener interaction line. Ask a question to Ron Boone. Ask a question to any of the Jazz players. 801-200-3738. A little bit to what Van Gundy was talking about. I talked to Brian Shaw for quite a while the other day before the game. And I went back to a quote he had. Shaw's the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, about when he said, when I came here, I tried to just implement the Indiana system blueprint and then realized I didn't have the guys that necessarily do the same stuff, and we had to evolve. And I wanted to learn more about that from him. And the main thing he said was that it was a mindset. That the first thing was a mindset, that they had just played the Denver Nugget up and down basketball for so long, that they just run and done that they just hadn't. It wasn't in them to naturally go and play defense in that fashion. And you know what? I think there's something to us on that one. And I don't want to zero in on it, but back to Al, there was kind of this mentality, if I go get my points, maybe I don't need to defend as much. And then I think that, frankly, I think that we'd all admit that resonated into Millsap in his final year here, where as good a player as he is, and he's terrific, that year was very bizarre. He was very different than he'd been. And so that, I think, was kind of the mentality. And then you go to last year, where these guys were a bit overwhelmed at how the circumstances they were in. And now I think that's still there a little bit. I mean, we've talked a lot now, similar to what Van Gundy was talking about and to what Brian Shaw was talking about with Ron Boone and Thurl Bailey, that these guys have to learn how to play harder. Ron had a brilliant point about Trey Burke the other night. He got punked in Toronto by Kyle Lowry, and then in the third quarter came out with a level of pizzazz that an energy that was different than anything I'd seen out of him before. And he played harder than I'd ever seen him play before. And it's almost as though you have to learn how hard you can actually play. And maybe you have to learn how hard not only how hard you can play, but how hard you have to play. It sounds weird, and I was asking Thurl and Ron about this, and I'm not sure I got a full answer, but a little bit of it is maybe they've been so good in their careers they haven't had to. And so they're only learning now. It's a little bit of the level of Dirk, what I was talking about earlier. That here's a guy who's 36 years old and knows we can't get in a half-court set against Chicago. Let's go. I know you're exhausted. I know you're tired, but let's go another step. Let's keep pushing it a little harder. Someone like Dwight Howard, I think we could argue he has no idea how hard he has to play still. He's so incredibly gifted. So you take the comments from Van Gundy, take the comments from Shaw, and then you take the comments from and watch the actions. And really, Trey's play has turned, and I think people can say it's turned since the buzzer beater. It's not the buzzer beater. It's turned since Kyle Lowry punked him at the end of the second quarter in Toronto, and then they opened up the third quarter, and every single play went at Trey. And Trey flipped it around and played harder in that sequence than I've ever seen him play offensively, and now he's playing harder than I've ever seen him play defensively. It sounds really strange, I think, the idea that a guy doesn't know how hard to play, because for most of us, I think when we go out and play, we play as hard as we possibly can every day. You know why? Because we're not very good. And there's times when you probably can play harder and you realize you can give a little bit more. But Shaw was really interesting. The second thing Shaw talked about was I have Kenneth Faried and I have David West. And, in Indiana, you have David West, and our whole concept was we never double team. We just guard our guy. And then I realized, I got Ty Lawson at 5'11" instead of George Hill at 6'4", and you got Kenneth Faried instead of David West. David West can hang on his guy a little bit better. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that going on with Quinn, where, you know what, if I got Trevor Booker trying to drop into below the ball in the pick and roll, that's not a very good use of Trevor Booker. I might believe in the system, but at 6'7", Trevor Booker sitting in the middle of the lane, dropping on the pick and roll is really useless. So let's go trap on the pick and roll with Trevor, and let's have these guys learn how to play multiple pick and roll defenses, which is different. Last year, Steve Clifford came with Charlotte, had this great defensive success, which has been an unmitigated disaster this year. And they decided to just play a base defense that they never and he even said to us, we're going to get torched by people. And Durant and Carmelo went and got 50 on him, and he kind of let it happen. And now I don't know if suddenly they've tried to integrate stuff and they've fallen apart, or what's happened with them entirely, or if they just got Lance Stevenson and fell apart, or if they just got so inefficient offensively that they fell apart. But I do think that you are beginning to see the Jazz try to learn how to evolve a little bit. One note on the Jazz, by the way. This is so boring to you, but I think I'm going to have to hammer this one home here for a while for everyone's well-being. Last year, efficiency differential, we were 28th in the NBA. Okay? So we were 28th in the league in efficiency differential. What do we think is progress this year? So, and let's make sure, where should we be this year? What's the first thing that comes to your mind of where we should be this year? Okay, if you think about it for a second, if you're 15th, you're a 41-win team. Okay, we're not 15th. If we're a 30-win team or 33-win team, you're probably 19th or 20th. Okay, we're 22nd right now. I actually would tell you I think that's a great deal of progress. Might not feel like it. We've lost 6 in a row, but we've gone from being the 28th efficiency differential team, offensive efficiency minus defensive efficiency, to the 20. Sorry, that was last year. To the 28th and 30th defensively, to the 23rd ranked team and 28th defensively. And we'll move up. If we move up to 20th or 21st, I think that's a huge. That's a huge step. That's progress. We're not doing anything more dramatic than that. It's frankly, it's kind of impossible. Miami and Brooklyn are 18 and 19. Those teams are better than we are. So to be 23rd in efficiency differential actually is about the progress I think is a reasonable expectation for this team to get. I see I have a ton of questions. I only have about 5 more minutes. I do want to get to one or two things. Something really interesting has happened with Rudy Gobert. In the first 9 games of the season, with Gobert on the floor, the Jazz allowed 108 points per 100 possessions. In the last 9, it's been 96.7. So from 108 to 96.7. The main reason is rebounding-wise, they're grabbing about 80% of the defensive rebounds when he's on the glass. Early in the year, he went for every block shot, was never in position to rebound, and Booker didn't rebound with him. In the first 9 games of the season, teams shot 68% in the restricted area with Gobert on the floor, and since then, they're shooting 61% with Gobert on the floor. Maybe most importantly, in the last 9 games, the Jazz are plus 2.5 with Gobert on the floor and minus 11 when he's off the floor. And earlier in the first 9 games, they were minus 9 with him on the floor. So they've got to figure out how to play offense with him. They still haven't figured out how to do that. But it's pretty interesting. His rim protection is 5th or 6th best in the NBA at this point. When Gobert's in the game, teams are shooting 43.6. When he's out of the game, they're shooting 49. Teams are scoring 94 points per 48 minutes with Gobert on the floor and 105 when he's on the bench. Some of that's because he's playing bench guys. Opponents shoot 58% of the restricted area when Rudy's on the floor, and 27.6% of their free agent their field goals come there. So he's stemming people away from shooting in the area, and 65.2 in the restricted area when he's off the floor. All the graphs are up at weareutahjazz.com/lockedonjazz. Pretty interesting stuff there. All right, quickly, let me jump to the questions. I think I had one or two other things, but we're going to win that. By the way, huge step. I'll post a story later today since I don't have time. We are Utah Jazz for Gordon Hayward. First good November of his career. A lot of times on pick and roll, guys like Ennis don't actually hold the pick instead of going to the basket. I think we've heard Britt on the pregame show go on Ennis about this. Is he right, or is Ennis doing what he's asked? You're making a read. If they overplay it to the top, you're supposed to slip it because then you can get separation from the big. But I think our guys are looking for that and are too willing to slip. I think there's an accuracy to that. But if the big man steps out on the point guard and separates from you, then you're supposed to slip it because now you can get separation from your big guy. A lot of thought that Derek and Rudy together could be great with their defense, but after the adjustment, after Quinn pulling them, could you see Rudy and Ennis become stronger as Ennis is offensively? I think Rudy and Derek is the next experiment. Logically, it should not work. Offensively, it should be a disaster. And that's why everyone stayed away from it. Can you turn Derek Favors into David West? Is the question. And then even that said, Indiana's offense is not very good. Doug, it looks like Dante's defense is better than Trey's. What do you think? I think it does look that way. So I think that's a good observation on your part. I also think that he's playing mostly second-tier point guards, not first-tier point guards. So be really cognizant watching of what happens to him when he plays a first-team point guard. He's also 6'6", longer, and he has fabulous defensive feet. So I don't think there's any question that Dante will be a better defender than Trey. But be careful when you're doing these comparisons that you're paying attention to who they're playing. So playing against Kyle Lowry is vastly different than playing Vasquez, who both will start tonight with DeMar DeRozan out. But I go to last, playing Ty Lawson is greatly different than playing Nate Robinson. The night before that, playing Reggie Jackson rather than playing Sebastian Telfair, who then got cut after the game, is a pretty dramatic difference. Playing Derrick Rose instead of playing Aaron Brooks or Kurt Heinrich or whoever they have, pretty dramatic, difference. So playing Tyreek Evans or Drew Holiday instead of Austin Rivers, really, you got to be very careful on that. Trey and Ennis have proven to be very bad at defending pick and roll, especially against pick and roll options, since Ennis doesn't come out to close after the pick. You got to know before we get all basketball X and O on everything, we got to know what the assignment is. So the Blake Griffin game, Ennis did what he was supposed to do. And Ennis, they don't want Ennis showing on the pick and roll. They want Ennis dropping down into the channel. And so a little bit of it has to do with whether Trey's doing a good enough job of getting the guy to Ennis correctly. You got to know what Ennis's defense assignment. Ennis is not good defensively, but before you got to know what the defensive assignment is before you can really fully criticize a player in that circumstance. And that's something that I'm at shoot around, so I do have access to, but it's very hard. I don't expect you to. So just be a little cautious on that. And, Ennis is probably not supposed to be getting switched onto the point guard very often unless Trey can't get through the pick and then calls for the switch, at which point Ennis is dead to rights, and there's nobody in the league that's 6'11" that's guarding a point guard very well unless they're Joakim Noah or Kevin Garnett in their prime, okay? I continue to be disappointed, surprised by the mediocre defensive rebounding of Cantor and Favors. There's no reason that both these guys shouldn't be very near double-digit rebounds per game. It's just due to lack of effort or ability, or totally unrealistic expectations on your part. How many guys in the league average double-figure rebounds? So I think that might be the first part. Second of all, neither of them are tall. Both of them are short for their position. Jack Sikma, who's really a fabulous, remarkable coach who's stunningly not in the league. I mean, absolutely absurd that he's not in the league. Are pointed out to me very early on that the problem for this team is that all our guys are undersized. Derek's one of here, Al Horford's smallest starting center in the league, and Kanter's 6'9" and not particularly athletic. So I'm not sure that's fair. DeMarcus Cousins averages 13 rebounds. Drummond averages 12. Vukovic averages 12. Zach averages 12. DeAndre Jordan at 12. Anthony Davis 12. And Tyson Chandler 12. Most of those are 7-footers that are remarkable. And Derek comes in at 8.6, playing 31 minutes a night. I got a hard time banging on Derek for that. I think Derek's rebounding has been pretty darn good, particularly considering that every night he's on the wrong side of the height issue. All right, I got to go get the kids. Thanks very much for a fabulous show. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a fabulous time doing it. I loved it. You have a great day today. See ya.